The following is a presentation of the Radio Misfits Podcast Network.
From the birthplace of modern winemaking, Sonoma, California, welcome to The Winemakers. Local experts Sam Couturi, Bart Hansen, and Brian Casey, along with host John Myers, invite you to listen in as they discuss all facets of winemaking. So sit back, pour yourself a glass, and let's hear what the guys have to say
Brian,
this week.
you already did the pours, but I need a pour to open the show. So what's next, buddy?
Yeah.
Come on.
Do you have a glass?
I do have a glass.
There
Thank you. And cheers.
Cheers.
All right. Welcome, everybody. I'm John Myers. Welcome to the Winemakers.
Oh, there's wine being poured, finally.
Yeah, there you go. And a beautiful, hey, well, this is a very special episode. Sam Couturi, Brian Casey, Elaine Chukan Brown. Welcome.
Chukan.
Chukan.
Hawk Wakawakka.
Hawk Wakawakka.
My personal favorite sardonic meatball.
Sardonic meatball reunites.
The canon of names
And
by which
Hawk Wakawakka is my personal favorite.
Chukwakawakka, she's great. Is that what the text from my father was?
Mr. Phil Couturi, named me Chukwakawakka, which is my favorite name. So.
And of course, the one and only Randall Graham.
Yeah,
Welcome to
house.
Sonoma, Matt.
Thank you.
What a pleasure.
My pleasure.
Excellent. Well, this is the first time I've really met you because I was on.
Oh, were you never here for any of the?
No, I've done 16 podcast episodes, and I actually believed until today that John did not exist.
Yeah.
He's a figment of our imagination.
Chatbot.
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
AI, create voice for radio.
absolutely. Are you kidding me? Face for radio.
Face for radio.
That's the thing.
We got those
So,
on our own.
Absolutely. Well, welcome. And you brought rain last night
I did.
and a beautiful morning. Wow.
My pleasure.
We were just talking about the smell of the grass and the pavement and everything after a rainstorm called petrichor.
Correct.
And you were talking about the molecules that make it that way.
Yes, there's a particular molecule called geosmin that is responsible for the smell of the ground after a rain. What's interesting about this particular molecule is it's also found in beets, in beetroot, and in Pinot Noir, and in Scotch whiskey. So at the right level, it's I think an enhancement. Too much of it, and I think it creates kind of a musty smell, and it's a defect in wine. But a little bit is quite a blessing, I think.
Well, I hear people in restaurants, if people don't like beets, they say because it tastes like dirt is what they say.
That's the whole point of it. That's why they taste so great, because they taste like dirt.
Right.
They don't taste like a manufacturing plant. You know, they taste like nature.
See, I don't want things that taste like dirt. I want things that taste like soil.
So there we go. Thank you, Sam.
That's the voice of my father. And
Yes.
Don't call it dirt. It's soil.
Yeah.
It's soil. It tastes like soil.
Well, speaking of soil, you guys were here talking about soil and creating wines that have a sense of place. And you do that. Absolutely.
Well,
And, you know, so does Enterprise in 16600.
Well, let's
Back
I'm
up.
super. The way this whole came together, of course, was in classic on-brand style, last-minute Sunday afternoon text messages, and a whole lot of planning. But obviously, the reason we say yes is it's Randall and Elaine. But I'm going to let you say it because I say it wrong. Popelouchum, which is your vineyard project in it's outside of Hollister, kind of.
San Juan Bautista.
San Juan Bautista, okay. And
That just sounds like a cool place.
It is a cool place. It's a very cool place.
San Juan Bautista.
In both senses of the word. It's on the cooler side of California wine growing. Like just inside the window to get Grenache, edgy and delicious. Mm-hmm. But also a very cool place in the sense that it's feels good to be there.
I'd like to be there. Where exactly is it?
Well, San Juan Bautista is in this mysterious county called San Benito County. And San Benito County is kind of nestled between a bunch of... San Juan Bautista itself is nestled where four counties converge: Monterey, Santa Cruz, Santa Clara, and San Juan and San Benito. So the other thing is we have a a lot of earthquakes in the neighborhood. I mean, the San Andreas Fault actually is the northern boundary of my property.
Okay.
Which is pretty amazing.
Weird flex, but I'll take it.
But I remember when Randall started this project, I was still at the Girl in the Fig,
Right.
and he was talking about doing this new project and doing new varietals, growing from seed. And it was a Kickstarter program, I think, at first.
Correct.
And what attracted me is I thought, 30 years from now, I could... Because part of it was if you join the Kickstarter program, I think you could
You get a cutting.
You could name one of them. So then I thought, I'm going to be drinking wine called the Brian Casey.
The Casey?
Right. So this has been going on. I mean, that was 10, 15 years ago.
10 years ago.
10 years ago, yeah. Yeah, Girl in the Fig years is our dog years, so it
Yes.
seems like about 30 years.
Yeah.
But you've been doing that since, and I think the goal is 10,000 new
Yes,
varietals?
we're up to now about 3,000. So we're making progress.
Yeah.
It's coming.
And can we talk about that? Like, because, you hear the Cabernet Sauvignon, right, is like the baby of Cab Franc and Sauvignon Blanc, and, the miracle of the bird that eats the right seed and germinates at the right spot. Grapes don't necessarily grow from seed, or at least that's my,
Well, recognized grapes don't grow from seed. You get new grapes when you grow from seed.
This is one of the weirdest conversations to have with people, is that you can go out in one of your vineyards, take a seed out of there, go plant it somewhere else, and have a completely
totally different,
which is bizarre, and I don't think people know this.
But I thought grapes were self-pollinated. Aren't they pollinating themselves?
Depends on the variety, actually.
Okay.
I think most vinifera, right?
Virtually all vinifera is self-pollinated.
Yeah.
But it can be pollinated by any random bit of pollen that floats in from outside as well. But that still will stay true to the mother of variety. So you can be pollinated with grapes pollinated from different fathers will actually express themselves similarly. Yeah. The fruit itself will.
The fruit itself.
And isn't that a lesson for us all?
Yes.
My mom, God bless her, used to go around and proudly describe her grandchildren, and she has 3 girls, and so of course the 3 girls' kids happen to have various fathers. And my mom would proudly say, "It don't matter who their daddy is." So
It's all about mom.
For my mom, it's all about the mom.
Matrilineal lineage.
Yeah, we do all look almost identical. Yeah, not self-pollinating, and yet.
Well, so it begs the question, Randall. People will probably wonder, why the heck would you want to do this?
Amusement. No, and others. I mean, I'm very proud of my career in the wine business, but ultimately, I think up till now, I've made some nice wines, I had some cute labels, and had some interesting ideas. But I have never really made any wines that were important. And an important wine is a wine, I think, that is capable of moving someone emotionally. I mean, I think that's kind of what wine can aspire to do, is affect you in a way that is personal and deep, and you don't even understand why it's working, but it's doing something to your emotion, to your emotions. Yeah. If I can do something like that, then that's a success, and that's something I aspire to do. And wines of place, I think, uniquely can do that. Where it's more than just simply a set of flavors. It's something that means more than just a style or something of that sort.
And all of the wines, most of the wines that we have here growing in California are wines that are grapes that have been brought over by other people and then planted here. So what we're talking about is doing something from this area that would basically be indigenous to California. And it maybe expresses terroir better than trying to bring grapes over from France and plant them here, hoping that
they express something differently. Yeah.
Well, it is always a dislocation. When you take something that is adapted to one set of conditions and you move it to somewhere else, you end up with something utterly new, and that new thing can be novel in a pleasant way, or novel in a kind of a jarring and discordant kind of way. Until you try it, you really don't know. Yeah. And one of the weird things that I found is that sometimes grapes that are sort of underachievers in their original place of origin, when you take them to the new world, they suddenly flourish, and it's kind of like being a kid in school and you don't do well in one school and you get moved to a new school, and then suddenly a new student emerges, who's far more competent and interesting than he or she was in the previous school.
Well, is there a variety that you're thinking of when you say that?
Strangely, Roussan
Okay.
Is an example of one. I think Viognier is an example. Another, changed very differently, grown in California. And then Tiburon, I think, is another grape that is very different.
And I know Tiburon. That's one of the ones that you're experimenting with at this.
Correct.
Popelouchum. Did I say it right?
Yes.
Yes.
Popelouchum.
I've been, reading about it for so long, and it's like, in your own head, you just keep pronouncing things the wrong way.
Tiburon, also known as Rossese di Dolce Acqua, is a largely it's entirely unknown grape in California. So jury's out to see how it does, but I think it's a grape of fabulous potential. And
it's essentially planted in 3 sites.
3 sites, correct.
3 different parts of the state. All of them go back to Randall making it happen. And so,
but nobody else in their right mind would be growing Tiburon in California. It's a pain in the neck to grow, but
well, who's to say what the right mind? And
well, one of the things I think, Brian, going back to some of the points you're getting at, one of the early conversations I ever had with Randall was about this idea that all of California wine is emulating somewhere else.
Right.
And you at the time you were troubling over this question, like, is it possible to make a wine that's not emulating somewhere else, but that's distinctly from here?
Yeah.
And in a weird way, taking a grape that underperforms somewhere else and bringing it to here and finding that a new expression of it, that actually isn't emulating, right?
Correct.
It's borrowing, but creating something totally new.
Absolutely.
But then I take it, Brian, what you were getting at is like this whole seed project, it's trying to create something that really is only from here. Like the seeds came from here.
And truly express terroir of California.
Because they originate from here.
Right.
Well, what's interesting about seeds, or more accurately or more precisely, not seeds, but a genetically diverse population, is a genetically diverse population, which is to say a wine made from a very large set of genetically diverse individuals, no longer expresses varietal characteristics, but potentially can better express soil characteristics or the characteristics of a site. Right. So, but in other words, by de-emphasizing one aspect of the wine, you're allowing another aspect of the wine to be more expressive.
Right.
And it should be said, too, that when you started doing this, no one else in the world was doing it. Now there's like 3 people in the world that have done seed projects, but and actually at least one of them started around the same time you did. But the point is, like, Randall started this, right?
Where else are the others?
Well, Sashi Moorman did something with Pinot down in Lompoc area.
Yeah, Santa Rita
Hills.
And then there's the niche influential project in Europe that Jose is studying and talked about, but I'm blanking on in the south, but I can't think of which country. Is it Italy?
Capri is doing some work with Sagrantino. There are some others that are doing these things kind of clandestine. Oh, Librandi did this in Calabria with Malioco and Galliopo.
The Calabria. That's
and
what I was
Dujac, I think, playing around with some unique varietals as well. I think they released a bottle of really unusual varietals.
Yeah.
And Randall, you have 4 different, very unique soil types on the property, right? And so,
correct.
Is the idea that you're planting the same grapes in all 4?
Not exactly. It may end up being 3 soil types that we're going to use, but the idea is to identify a unique, distinctive, strong terroir, and then plant a diverse set of grapes in that particular site. So we're doing, for example, offspring from common parents, but each plant is genetically different from the other. So it'll be about 2,000 or 2,500 different plants, all from the same parent, but genetically distinctive.
Wow.
So the idea is to, again, de-emphasize the varietal characteristics to allow the soil characteristics to emerge and see if a volcanic soil produces a wine that's distinctive from, say, a calcareous soil from a granitic soil, if you will.
So, Sam, what I'm curious about what's going on in your head, because if you have all these different grapes growing out there, then you're needing to make these. I think you're making the wines in small tanks.
No, these wines. Well, it's a relatively small lot, but they're all going to be blended together.
Right.
You just harvest at the same time.
But what's tricky is that these have white and red parents. So the offspring, some of the offspring are going to be red, some are going to be white, maybe some even pink. So how do you?
But you're still picking them all together.
Haven't decided whether we're going to keep the reds and the pinks together, the pinks and the whites together, or just chuck everything.
Just go for it all.
Just go for it.
Can we just start from the beginning of the process? That's where I'm sitting there going, all right, I know what grape seeds look like. By the time we're done with them, they've been fermented, and James doing his taking pictures through the windows. You're not creepy at all, James. A fermented the must, the pumice, the seeds and the skins left over. Obviously, those aren't viable seeds. How do you? Let's start from
No, the seeds are viable after the fermentation.
After the fermentation, is that where you're collecting seeds from the pumice?
Correct.
And then you plant them in little planters.
You clean them very well. Clean all the pulp off of them and dry them, and then actually let them go through a period of dormancy put them in the fridge for 3 months, and germinate them as seeds, and then pick out the ones that are funky and weird and discard them on the slag heap of history, and then the good ones, the viable ones, you retain and plant out in a nursery.
Okay, and I mean so that's the other piece of this is there's selection going on from top to bottom, right? You're picking the best seeds, you're picking the most viable germinates. You're planting those seedlings that are the strongest are getting moved to.
But he's picking them in the way nature would pick them, in that those seeds wouldn't propagate anyway. These germinations were dying anyway, so it's just that the ones that remain intact,
It's the things that are gonna grow, and the ones that don't grow. But all right, I know how long it takes to plant some rootstock, graft on the bud of your variety, grow it up the stake, harvest.
Right.
What's the time frame of? Is it considerably longer?
A couple of years longer, depending on how much sunshine and how much water you have. If you have a lot of sunshine and a lot of water, it goes faster. So Davis, they can bring it up the stake pretty quickly. Okay. San Juan Bautista, not so
much
quick,
sunshine,
not so
as much water.
Correct. We're short on both.
But also not so hot.
Right.
Not so hot. Exactly. I mean, I like
maybe
it.
super hot in the other sense.
In the other sense, exactly.
But not so hot in the temperature sense.
It's hot. So hot right now. And the whole thing is fascinating. I mean, it's
because then rootstock. Then you're not using AXR. You're
not using any roots. They're all unrooted.
Right. So
then you need to grow it in an area that doesn't have phylloxera.
Right.
At least
and then
to establish the nursery.
Gophers are munching on your...
Gophers love seedlings.
Well, and he also has turkeys once the fruit comes out.
Right. Pest pressure is high.
Yeah. There's foxes.
Bobcats.
So what percent survives?
No bear.
Depends on the variety. Some parents or some self-crosses are more viable than others. So Grenache seems to be quite successful. Muscats, old varieties seem to have more viability than young varieties. So Cabernet, for example, I'm told by Andy Walker that self-crosses of Cabernet are mostly non-viable because it's a relatively young variety. So it's genetically unstable.
Interesting. So varieties that have existed in the world longer are more likely to create viable seedlings.
Right. That's my understanding.
Okay. That's super interesting.
Is there any way of like once you have something that's going really good, that you can do like the genome map of it and figure out what its parents were. Like this was Grenache with Tiburon and it had a, you know, its mom was Roussan and
the deer that walked by.
And the deer that walked by. Like, can you follow that thread, or once it's established as its own thing, there's no like connection back to, you can't like figure out back to what it was. Is like the ampelograph, are the leaf shapes different? Or is just like everything about it is challenge? I mean, and I guess that's the point. Everything about it sort of challenges what we think we know about
the old
viticulture,
rules,
right? Yeah.
We know they're grapes.
If you have a record of the genome of the parents, you can figure it out. But if one of the parents is unknown,
Right.
it remains unknown. I mean, you could figure out one of the parents, but not necessarily both parents.
Okay.
So, for example, I don't believe Tiburon, the parentage of Tiburon has been established. Syrah, of course, has been established,
Right.
but Tiburon has not.
Okay.
Now, when we do self-cresses of Tiburon, and if a quarter of the offspring are white grapes, we'll probably can conclude that one of the parents was a white grape,
Right.
which will be quite interesting.
Okay.
We should clarify, though, that what we're tasting right now, when haven't talked
let's
about it at
talk
all,
about
these are
and
not seasonal
actually, that
wines.
was another question I have. What the hell do you tell the TTB when you put this wine in a bottle and be like, yeah, it's some variety that only exists on my property in San Benito County. Don't worry about it.
I
Desk
think they're
pusher
going
in Washington,
to
D.C.
dispatch the SWAT team when
Without question.
when the label approval application goes in, the SWAT team
Right.
gets
Black
dispatched.
helicopters descend on
Exactly.
a citron somewhere in Santa Cruz County.
Look for the citron. That's the
Look
clue.
for the citron with
That's
some
the
blue
clue.
smoke coming
That's
out
how
of the
you find
tailpipe.
it. That's how you find it. Okay, but these wines. So we started with the Blanc from Popelouchum, and these are vines that from grape types that you love and wanted to try there. And I'm especially a big fan of the Blanc. This is a
It's delicious.
different iteration of it than you've done previously.
Correct.
But it's half Grenache Blanc, half Grenache Gris.
Exactly.
And this is a 22 vintage,
22.
right? Yeah.
and a very interesting color.
I guess that's the Gris that's bringing
Well,
this
this
in.
is, but it's also, this is a different iteration than you've
Green
done in
and
the past.
skin
And some skin
3
contact.
hours of skin contact.
We
3
should
hours.
clarify that Randall's not a fan of skin contact, and yet decided to know the site. Let's see how it does with this one.
Yes. Correct. Exactly. I'm not a big fan of skin contact because I'm just not a big phenolic kind of fan. And I like wines that sort of are lighter and more textural that way.
Well, in previous vintages of this particular wine, there hasn't been skin contact, but there's still been this incredible like power of presence in the mouth, not from
Yeah.
ripeness, but from like just this distinctiveness and kind of density of character in the mouth. And so now to see that's still there, there's this, you know, I've been trying to figure out how do I describe this characteristic that I always see in the wines from this site, Popelouchum. And the way you sort of captured my blubbering around about it earlier was you said it's quasi-saline, because it has the mouth stimulation like salt does, like it tightens your mouth, but it doesn't, it's not that it's salty,
Right.
you know. But this wine, I'm fascinated by the idea that we can do some skin contact and you still have this quasi-saline drive to the wine, because a lot of skin contact wines, it's almost like the mineral character goes away as that
Oxidized
fruit.
past it or
Yeah.
something. Yeah.
The other thing that I failed to mention earlier, this is all natural acidity and malolactic and bottled without filtration. So I think a lot of the texture comes from the fact that it was not filtered. I mean, one of the issues we have is
It go through mallow, is that what you said?
goes through mallow.
Wow.
Well, and the acid is still so prominent in
Yeah.
a really pleasing way.
I'm sure,
I mean,
the acid must have been crazy when you started.
through the
before.
roof.
Yeah.
I think this wine,
To the
actually,
moon-
this
to
is
the
all,
moon- to the moon, Alice.
this is a very sensual wine but also erudite. Like, I think we think of everybody's afraid to say wine's sensual. So as the only apparent woman in the room, I'm going to go ahead and use the word because I'm allowed. As a woman, I'm still allowed, to reference sexy things. Okay, so anyway, the just to torment Brian a little bit.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Wondering when that was coming.
It was just hanging right there.
That's right. It's been in the room the whole time. So, but anyway, my point is this wine is very sensual. And I think that when we claim that about a wine, we assume it's only for pleasure and somehow that diminishes its value or its seriousness. But this wine is actually, there is a seriousness to it, but it's so much about mouthfeel. It's so much about this fleshiness in the palate. And yet there's like tension and again, this quasi-saline mineral element and drive. There's just a lot going on here.
Well, and for it to be as sort of experimental and I hate to use the word academic, but it is made with the intent of exploring this concept. Also, just like achieve drinkability. That sort of like baseline of what we're doing in wine is like you want to make something that you want to drink.
Right.
And sort of take all the variables that you've given yourself, which is essentially what, it sounds like from my standpoint, you've mastered the art of making wine the normal way and wanted to like increase the level of complexity and complication in your life with this project. But to, again, reach that most important baseline of like something that you want to drink, and it's got all that.
And so what you were starting to say is that these wines that are on the table aren't made from
these are not seedling wines.
varietals,
Yeah,
correct.
the seedling project is still in process. Last
Right.
year, though, I was able to visit Randall at Popelouchum, and we walked through the seedling rows, and like every single vine looked different. The color of the fruit, the size of the clusters, all looked totally different. And one of the things he had me do was walk through the rows and pull off clusters from each of them and then just smash them into my mouth all at once, so because again, that's the goal of the resulting wine is they'll all be harvested and fermented together.
Right.
And so what does that taste like? But you haven't made a commercial wine in that way yet.
Not yet. I mean, so this is, I think, an important idea, if I can try to express it, which is when I first started working with the seedlings, the self-crossed seedlings, my thought was I'll find a unique variant that is better suited to San Juan Bautista than the others. So in other words, if you start with, for example, Serene or Syrah was adapted to Côte Rôtie in the Northern Rhone. And there's no reason to imagine that the variety that was selected for the Northern Rhone is going to be necessarily particularly well suited to, say, San Juan Bautista. Maybe I could find by allowing some differences to exist, I could find one that was better suited. Now, my thinking has evolved since then to imagine that maybe such a thing could exist, but likely I will not have the wit to discover what it is, at least in my remnant of my short lifetime. Maybe somebody else later on might. But the new idea that I have, that I think is a more powerful idea, is that instead of necessarily looking or expecting to find the best clone or the best biotype, instead, perhaps the so-called best biotype is a composite of a bunch of different biotypes. That the most interesting thing is actually a suite of genetically distinctive individuals rather than one single one. And perhaps this is a way of achieving complexity in a wine that could not be achieved another way. So that's kind of the bet of the self-crosses.
But these wines, I'm super excited about that idea. Just this, like, I get this, constellation, this image of a constellation of details and, like a starscape, right? Like where there's just all of this detail and all of this range, and that becomes the complexity of a wine, except that's coming from the very formation of the vineyard itself, where every plant is different.
Right.
So I find that fascinating. The and we don't know yet. And the wines we started with the Blanc from Popelouchum, and that's the Grenache Blanc, Grenache Gris, with a little bit of skin contact. But I've just poured us now the 2021 Pinot Noir, and I think we have to take a moment to acknowledge we're about to taste Pinot Noir made by Randall Graham, which is, as he's described it been the curse of his career. And yet he keeps making Pinot Noir.
Repetition compulsion. What can I say? Dr. Freud characterized it well. The return of the repressed.
The return of the repressed. I feel like we're on that path.
Well, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
I'll say that.
And so this is also from Popelouchum.
The Blanc was just, that has a beautiful nose. The Pinot is delicious.
Thanks.
But it should be said too, this is the 21 vintage, which is a drought year. So everything is more concentrated and intense just by the growing conditions of the year.
Also, I'm remiss not to mention that these are very densely planted plants. These are planted meter by half meter apart.
Whoa.
So very little fruit per vine.
Per vine. And just on stakes, you're not on trellises with these.
On trellis,
You are on trellis with that.
But on a very steep slope.
Reasonably steep, north-facing slope. Actually, it's gentle slope. It's kind of in a protected little
Is it
area.
even a slope?
Yeah, it's probably. Of course.
Sorry, we keep changing how dramatic the slope is. So I thought, wait, maybe it's not a
It's
slope
so
at all.
steep down that it actually goes up.
No, it is on a slope, but
Gentle
very
slope.
densely,
Sloping.
very
Slightly.
densely planted slope.
Well,
Stand on the one side, you can be a little taller.
I fell my ass down that slope. That's why I was thinking it's super steep. Okay.
So, Elaine, you had some notes and you were doing a video program before we had the podcast. And one
16600 Studios.
yes.
This is what I printed out. This is not
Okay.
Elaine's.
All right.
Okay.
Well, there's a big quote on here that says, we're really trying to pay attention to the microbiology of the soil and create an emphasis on sense of place.
Mm-hmm.
What is the soil composition there? And why does it make it so special there?
Well, there's several distinctive soil types at Popelouchum. There's some beautiful limestone soils. There's some granitic soils. There's some volcanic soils, and some less interesting ones as well. But the whole idea is to enhance the microbiology of the soil, the biological complexity of the soil. And we do this through the use of composting and
I see biochar.
biochar as well. Yeah. And obviously minimal tilling or no tilling.
Well, is the whole vineyard meter by half meter, or just
No, God help us. No,
No, just the Pinot.
just the Pinot.
Okay.
That's enough.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
That's
Well, if you're going to grow the grape that cursed you to begin with, you
Right.
might as well grow it as a curse,
lean
Lean
in.
in, live
Lean
the
into
curse.
I gotta go work the Pinot Noir.
I have to ask, why has it been such a curse?
I think because I love it too much, and this is the universe's way of saying, just I don't know what
Loosen
I don't
the
know
grip.
exactly what the universe is it's trying to tell me something. I'm not sure exactly what, but
Well, what would your life mean if you hadn't had Pinot to guide it in this way?
right. I mean, the fact that Pinot has failed has been a wonderful thing for my career. It's led me to Rhone varieties, and Rhone varieties have been very kind to me over the years. And to all sorts of other things that I would otherwise have never visited. So I'm therefore thankful for my failure,
For your suffering.
for my suffering. Yes.
What is in Gone in 60 Seconds? Nicolas Cage calls the one car that he could never steal the Shelby Cobra. He calls it Eleanor. Eleanor. You should make a Pinot Noir called Eleanor. The one that
Eleanor
finally,
haunts you.
Yeah, exactly. Keeps getting away.
The one that got away. Yes.
Well, he did finally get it back.
He did finally get it back, and into the container and onto the ship to be shipped out. Whatever that.
The ship that got stuck in the Suez Canal.
Probably
That one? Yeah.
Let's mix all the.
Yeah.
I see the Panama Canal is like dry these days. They
Oh,
can't put
dear.
anything through
Well, let's
there.
not get into that too much. That sounds like politics and climate change.
No.
I need a break.
No politics. No politics.
I wanted to talk about these Bordeaux varietals
Well, we
that
haven't
they're
even
starting
gotten
to
into
experiment
movies yet.
with.
Or no, I guess you just got us into movies.
Yeah,
But
I know.
no, but
We can't go too far. We're on a limited time.
yeah, I'm
time
sorry,
crunch
Brian.
today.
You were what Bordeaux? What?
No Marvel comic
Oh,
universe.
there's
Yeah.
instead of coming up with these new, there's thinking about getting these varietals in Bordeaux that were sort of kicked out of Bordeaux because they either weren't producing or weren't getting ripe. And now that climate has changed, of bringing some of those
Great
varietals
idea.
back.
That's fantastic.
But is Bordeaux ready to start making some changes?
Well, it's trying. I mean,
Yeah.
it's now allowing 5% blend in of like various varieties, including
Alvarinho is
Portuguese.
one of them,
For
yeah.
God's sakes, they're going to bring
Nacional, I
Portugal
think,
to
is on that
Bordeaux.
list,
Like,
right?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That seems pretty radical for Bordeaux.
Well, and is that sort of part of this exploration too? Is things that will do. You've said the San Benito is a little bit cooler in a number of ways, but is part of it have to do with climate change? That maybe there is some things that are better suited.
We don't have a lot of water in our vineyard, so we're severely constrained. So I'm looking really hard at drought tolerant varieties like Sanso and Tiburon, which seem to be particularly successful in San Juan.
Yeah.
Well, and as you're going through with the self crosses, is it? My guess is that you're finding one that's just sort of self-evident that there's some crosses that end up being more successful with the soil types and the climate and the lack of water. And are you sort of? Is it sort of like, again, like the most extreme and complex version of like a Missau selection, where you're identifying these crosses that are the strongest, and then trying to propagate those more? Or...
It's not exactly obvious which ones are, what one should be selecting for. The qualities of drought tolerance and may not be necessarily the same qualities that give you the highest quality wine grapes.
Right.
Maybe the highest quality wine grapes are these kind of very feeble and tortured individuals.
That checks out.
Yeah. So
I bet winemakers before.
more study and observation is required.
Yeah.
More study of feebility
Feebility and torture
is needed.
and levels of torture.
See a new book by Elaine coming.
Studies in Feebility by Elaine Chukan Brown.
aka Czechoslovakia.
Yeah. Czechoslovakia's newest book on feebility.
So what is time frame for some of the new varietals making it actually into commercial?
We planted last year almost 2 acres of self-crop. I have to be very careful in the precise nomenclature, because somewhere Jamie Good is listening.
Hopefully.
You can't call them Serene Blanche, but I selected these white variants of Serene, self-crossed Serene, and planted almost 2 acres of mixed block of these white variants, and those are coming up the stake this year or this next year. And the following year, we should have a small crop of fruit from that. So that's quite exciting.
And real quick, for those of you listening, or maybe in the room who don't know exactly what Serene is the other name of Syrah or the parent of Syrah?
No.
None.
Well, yes. So Serene is.
Okay. Well,
if you go to Syrah, if you go to Côte Rôtie, for example, and you look at a vineyard, they will actually have vineyards of parts of the block planted to Serene and parts of the block planted to Syrah, and they're phenotypically different. Serene is a smaller bunch, dense, tighter bunch. Ripens a little bit later. It's higher in acidity, and it's a little more ovate in shape, or ovoid in shape. And it's
even more than regular Syrah.
Even more than regular Syrah. And it's slightly more peppery. Okay. But it's also more prone to Syrah decline. So it kind of crashes sooner. However, genetically, they're identical. So the only conclusion that can be reached is it's infected with probably a benign virus. And my colleagues at Gallo tell me that it's actually a particular virus called red globe grape virus.
Red globe
grape virus, RGG.
See, this is where the Marvel references start to show up.
I know, really.
Yeah.
Venturing into dangerous territory here.
Okay, so I just poured us, this is still Pinot from Popelouchum, but it's the 22 vintage. So we tasted the 21 vintage a minute ago, and this is the 22.
How much difference do you notice in these two?
Well, so for me, right away, the 22 has like much more open aromatics. The 21 is like this gorgeous wine, but kind of reticent at first pour. I think all of Randall's wines, going as far back as he's been making wine, have always had this quality of opening up more the longer they've been open. And I was saying this earlier, like even as long as a week after opening, the wines are like becoming more vibrant, which is pretty unusual in the world of wine. But the, so these were opened 2 hours ago. The 21, there's something about the 21 that's like deeply compelling to me, yet I can't explain or describe it because it feels like it's still shy. But the 22 is not super outgoing, but it's a little more willing to check out who's around and talk to them quietly,
Slightly less introverted.
Slightly less introverted, yeah.
Less autistic.
Right.
So,
a little neurodiversity.
Yes.
Vino diversity.
Yeah.
It's
This
such
side
an
of the
interesting
table
way
probably
to
also
describe
has
it.
that though. So,
Such an interesting way to describe that, really.
no, thank you. I guess I think of wines as having their own character. Well, maybe some wines don't, but but compelling wines have a character, much like people do. And if you're observant, you can start to describe it.
It's talking to me.
You have thought, the Randall, like, what's your experience with these two vintages of Pinot?
I'm still trying to understand it. As I said earlier, the 21 worried me as being just too austere and too phenolic and too extracted, but it's showing great right now and with immense potential. And the 22 has been always very flatteur and always very charming, kind of maybe a little too charming, if you will.
What do you think accounts for the difference in the vintages?
Beats the heck out of. I have theories. The 21, I think, as I said, was very dry, and the bunches were extremely small and very concentrated. So I think we had this kind of preternatural level of concentration on the 21. 22 is maybe a little more normal, closer to a normal vintage. Still didn't irrigate it. I think we gave it 2 small irrigations during the summer. So these are as close to dry farm as you can get.
So how deep would those roots be that allow it to go with just 2?
I don't know, honestly. Probably 6-8 feet by this time.
Because the vines are fairly young as well, right?
Yeah.
Well, the Pinot must be, 15 years now?
No,
really?
it's 10 years, but as I mentioned earlier, we had to replant it
That's right.
because of
I
the
forgot,
darn rats that just infested.
Pinot was the first he planted in Popelouchum, but he also planted a bunch of mulch about it, and the rats decided that was really cool.
Super
and
cool.
ate the Pinot,
The
first round of Pinot. So then he replanted. So now the current vines are 10 years old, but the original planting was a little older.
No, actually, the oldest ones I think are about 10 years.
Oh,
old.
okay.
The more recent ones are maybe 6 or 7 years. So it's still a relatively young vineyard, and we still have still a bunch of replants to go. So, and we planted this to 12 different clones of Pinot, kind of randomly picked. Some of them are more interesting than others. I think that's another conversation altogether.
We could have an entire series of podcasts devoted to the minutia of Pinot Noir clones, and I would never want to listen to it.
No, I was going to say, so many people have talked about that so much. Do we care?
No, we don't care.
Well, so I was just at a conference. I was just at a conference in New Hampshire, and while trying to describe regional differences in wines, this woman said, Freud describes the narcissism of difference, and isn't that what we're talking about now?
The narcissism.
I think that's
we
the
built an entire industry on the
perfect
narcissism of difference.
The perfect phrase to describe obsession with Pinot clones is the narcissism of difference. Yeah. It's not that much
6,
difference.
6, 7?
No.
No,
we're not going to name them.
So what is this last wine that that Brian is pouring?
The reason that Brian's here.
22 Sanso.
Ooh, there you go. Can't wait. It's rare that you get a Senso. I mean,
Senso is going to be the savior of the California wine industry.
Oh, I love it. Shots fired.
Okay, but you also made this in a distinctive, unusual way. So.
Yeah. So these are very young vines. This was the first harvest. These are 3-year-old vines, if you will. Probably overcropped in some cases. Threw a lot of the stuff on the ground. The stuff that was ripe, we kept ripe-ish. We picked and then air dried it for 4 days to lignify the stems and enhance the ripeness a little bit. So the finished wine, I think, still is 12.5% alcohol.
Yeah.
But we got a lot more concentration from the wine in the
Actually, 12.
12-ish.
If you did a brick sample on day 1 and day 4 of that process, how much does it increase?
It really depends on how dry it is and how much time, but you pick up over 4 days, you'll pick up about 1.5 bricks, maybe 2 bricks. Okay. So it probably came in and started around 19 and a half and dried to 21.5, 22 maybe.
To get to 12%, that's all right.
Because that's what you're doing with the language of yes wines.
Correct.
Is
air
doing
drying.
the air drying, and then you're losing liquid.
Correct. And lignifying the stems
right.
more as significantly, yes.
Yeah.
And then do you do a significant portion whole cluster, all whole
Heck
cluster?
yes, we go to all that trouble.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the point, right?
Well, this is 100% whole cluster
Correct.
with slightly dried fruit.
Yes, 100% whole cluster.
But you don't get the signature, that green signature of the whole cluster at all, right?
Thank
That's
goodness.
the whole concept,
point.
right?
By the lignification, you're eliminating that herbaceous vegetal
And are you
character.
looking? Do you lay this out and you're like, all right, I'll come back in 4 days? Or are you checking it every day to see is it like progress on the stems or?
Well, I know the first day you just keep your pants on, Randall. They're not going to be ready after 1 day, so it usually takes 3 or 4 or 5.
But it changes that much in 4 days?
Yes, significantly. Wow. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
Well, there's so much more tannin than you expect here. I mean, not that it's aggressively tannin, but it's.
Yeah, but they're resolved. But
Yeah. But it's definitely I can feel it, in the palate.
At last, a use for those FYBs.
This is a juicy wine.
Yeah.
Yep.
It just makes my mouth water.
For sure.
Wow. I'm in love.
And Randall, why do you think that this is going to be the saving grace of California wine industry?
One of the things that California has to figure out how to do is to make wines that are relatively competitive in value. California wines are too darn expensive.
Yeah.
It's expensive to grow grapes in California. Senso can be a prodigious yielder, so it produces a thrifty crop, which is to say lots of grapes. The other thing about Senso is it seems to be particularly drought tolerant, and that's quite significant as water becomes as scarce as it is. So I think it's a variety for the future, and it produces delicious wine. Yeah. And I think wines that are 12.5%, 12.5%, people can actually drink and enjoy.
Yeah, part of the new journey, right?
Live
Part
to
of
tell the tale.
One of the saving graces of the natural wine movement. We're finding out that people maybe want less alcohol in their wines.
Well, it's amazing what 2% will do.
Yes.
14 seems big now.
Well,
12 is great. Yeah. Well, no, understand that's what it is. So, but if they're looking,
don't look at any of the bottles you get out of
17.
No.
Okay, all right.
I would never be that honest.
Right. Okay.
One of my favorite tasting experiences with Mr. Phil Couturi was him tasting a 13% alcohol wine and saying to the winemaker, I like a little more ripeness than this myself personally, but I can see what you're going for here.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing my dad always says about working with 30 plus different winemakers. Everybody has a different opinion of what right means and what tastes good to them and what style they're looking for. The vineyards that we farm are in places that have water and sunshine, and ripe happens at a different place than places with either less water or less sunshine. So that's, the basis of it, and it's also the vintage. Some years ripe happens at 12-13% alcohol. Some years ripe happens at 14-15% alcohol. For me, that's I don't actually, the last thing I look at when I look at a bottle is what the alcohol is. It's the least important
Balance,
factor.
right?
Right. How it tastes, how it feels, how it smells.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter. The alcohol, wines can be out of balance and taste hot at 12%. And they can be totally fresh and vibrant at 16%. It's just
or
a
you
matter
can
of...
be really hungover and a 10% alcohol feels like too much.
Right. So many variables go into it.
Yeah.
How many century eggs you ate the day before probably affect that also.
Yeah, some, but not too many. Yeah. You should be careful.
All right, guys. I know we need to hop out of here.
We're unlimited. This was a
That's
last
very
minute throw together.
unfortunate too. Very unfortunate. We have to cut this.
I know we could. Well, I feel like this happened last time we had Randall on the show too. It was
That was Sweet D.
Sweet D Grenache Day parties.
Yeah.
And we could talk. There's lots of questions that we have, Randall, and we need all the help we can get, and you provide some of the answers, so we appreciate it.
And let's just say our average show is about 2 hours.
Yes, but 3 times as long as this one's going to be. But
It's,
that's
car,
all good.
it's car talk for
we're
wine.
almost an hour.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Car talk for wine.
Yeah.
Do you edit this down or is
None.
Let it
Never.
roll.
Maybe once.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
If somebody says something they really need to take back, we will. But
Yes.
And we don't invite him back.
Exactly.
Sam, any shout outs?
Let's see. This is episode 301.
Yes.
So go back and listen to episode 300, our
party.
listener appreciation party.
That was crazy.
We have some totally wild. It's happening in 2 weeks. We're living in the future, Elaine.
Oh, my whole life is
Hop
like
in the
that.
DeLorean.
We're trying to exactly. The Citron gets to 82 miles an hour. We've released some cool things in the future in 16600.
Yeah.
You check your emails. The Wine and Vinyl is a different name, I think. The Record Club, 3 bottles and a unreleased or rare vinyl record in a box. So check that out.
And get your tickets for New Year's
Oh
Eve.
yeah, Marty O'Reilly at the Sebastiani Theater New Year's Eve party.
It's a big deal.
Marty O'Reilly and
it's fun.
Littleworth opening, fresh off of
Tanner?
Tanner's birthday party, which apparently I couldn't make it, but apparently it was a great show.
We had a good dinner. Yeah.
The other
Elaine?
thing that occurs to me is if people have heard us talking about these wines,
How do you
Yeah.
buy? How do you buy
how
the
do you
wine?
buy
Yes.
Popelouchum?
Yes.
How do you buy
Alright.
Popelouchum wines?
This is the story of my life. I'm an artist, not a merchant. So I always forget the bit about monetizing something. Because there actually is a website, Popelouchum.com.
Okay, so let's spell that.
Oh, just like it sounds.
Popelouchum.
That's Popelouchum.
Exactly.
And I will also say that they have some of my favorite labels in the business too.
Oh,
so
yeah,
they're
they're
very
really
cool wine
cool.
labels.
Fibonacci's greatest hits.
Out of Salinas. Salinas?
Salinas, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so Popelouchum.com.
Popelouchum.com.
These
the
wines are
website.
available for purchase
Even as we speak.
as we speak. Okay, go ahead and get them.
And I recommend people trying some of the language of yes wines too.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, those are gorgeous wines.
Every time I try and get them, they're all sold out.
The Fairmont has a few bottles here in
Alright.
Sonoma if you need.
They're now gone since Brian has announced
Yeah,
that.
exactly.
They're already gone.
I thought I
By the
had
time you
hookups,
drive
but
over
I guess
there,
not.
they will be gone.
Because Elaine's going to drive faster than me.
I'll share them.
Okay.
I saw them on the wine list at Girl in the Fig.
Oh, good. Okay.
Nice.
Okay,
Excellent.
even better. We can walk.
Yeah, totally. I'm still going
Right now, even.
Right.
Yep.
Thank you, Randall.
Any shout outs from
Appreciate
you?
you.
What's going on? Yeah, what's next in the life
Oh,
of
dear
Chuck
Lord
Wakawakka?
God Almighty.
London, New
Wakawakka,
York, Paris,
literally,
Munich.
I just flew back. I just did, a 3-week trip, which was San Francisco to Shanghai to Taipei to Hong Kong to Manila to
Whoa.
Virginia to New Hampshire to here. In other words, okay, so I started in Shanghai and yet came all the way here to your podcast. That's the route I took.
And bonus
I told
points,
him, look, I'll go speak in Taipei, sure, fine. But I want
Get me back to Sonoma in
Taiwanese
time.
beef noodle soup, and I want to get back in time for the podcast. Those are my 2 conditions for the trip.
Randall, anything to say? Close this out.
I've said it all.
All right.
There it is.
Well, thanks for listening, everybody. We are the Winemakers, and
Drink more Norton, drink more Cunningham.
Subscribe, review,
Thank you,
tell your
Seth.
friends. Only if they're
Review.
cool.
All righty. See you next week, everybody.
Explore.
Bye.